expanding our provision of occupational health to make sure we're getting best value for them as well. So looking at making sure the quality that of stuff that goes to occupational health results in quality out. We want clear and defined processes in terms of how people report absences. If they don't report, how we deal with unauthorised absence. We'd like, defined and clear guidance on annual leave and sickness combined. At the moment, we don't have any of this in place. So if somebody reports sick from when they're on leave, how is that managed in accordance with the framework? We've got underpinning all of this is our obligation under the Equality Act to make sure that we're fair and make any adjustments as and when necessary. So that is throughout the policy as well. We've got a lot more robust guidance on certain things and how managers should be supporting people in the workplace. The elements of our sick pay as an organisation, there is a table in the policy, so you'll see what our entitlement is. We have no control over that as an organisation. The council is sort of signed up to collective green book, and therefore we comply with that sick pay procedure. So it's making sure that when we do have people that are securing the full amount, how we're managing that, because there obviously the impact to the organisation. And again, it's just about looking at having more information out there for colleagues about ill health retirement, which is an entitlement under the pension scheme. Again, the council has no control over that. It's something that's done by independent assessment. So I think what we want to do is have a policy that supports both sides. It supports the council, but also our colleagues, and just having that clear, defined information out there. We at present do have trigger points in place, but they aren't monitored properly. So this policy will then show how we will monitor those trigger points if they're breached, but also managing that long-term absence in terms of the support. But ultimately, if a colleague isn't well enough to return to their role, how do we support them? Is it redeployment under medical capability? Or ultimately, if the council has to make a decision that's in the best interest of all parties. So that is the aim of the policy ultimately. We will look at, when we get approval from board, we would look at how we implement it to make sure that we are upskilling our managers to make sure that they're truly supporting people, whether they're in work or not. It works both ways. It's not just about being off work. It's also, if they're unwell, how can we support them to stay in work? So looking at pathways of how we can also return them to work at an earlier opportunity, whether that could be in an interim role until we can get them back to their substantive role. So I think, as we've said, it's a huge policy. It's a huge change for us as a council, and it's something that is similar. We've benchmarked against other councils, and it's sort of tried and tested. A lot of it is standard stuff as well, but as I said, it's about having that underpinning financial position for the council too. So
I think just to add, it obviously connects also with our people strategy and the sort of bigger picture around that, and generally about the health and well-being of our staff. So it's one piece of the puzzle. It's quite a big piece of the puzzle. But as I say, it's just really important that we're looking at this holistically, and it's not in isolation. So it's a really big piece of work. But we've also done a lot of work with the unions and our consultation panel as well. So it's something that we've been sharing and talking to our colleagues about, as I say, for quite a period of time, just to get as much input as possible.
And I think whilst it's a new policy for us, I think as we would with anything, we would look to implement and then also review on a regular basis to make sure that it's working. If there's practice updates or legislation updates, to account for those. So I think the plan would be to look at implementation and review on an initial 12-month basis, just to make sure it is working and taking into account any feedback, and also looking at any minor feedback we have when we go out to implement, like how in practice does this work. So
fantastic. Can I make one further comment actually, and then we've got two questions. I think there is a further stage, isn't there, if I understand rightly, which is that the policy goes through the 3 Cs process, which is about ensuring that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and
Yeah.
capital letters at the start, and that the flow of the document is right.
Yeah, so it would be subject to 3 C's, which is clear, clarity and confidence, something like that, about all of our documents reading as they should. So it would go through the 3C process, it would pick up anything, and it's about making sure it's accessible as well.
Yeah.
So we would go through all the natural checks that we go through with any of our other policies and documents that the council produces. So yes.
Fantastic. I think we've got Pauline, Sarah and Stephen and Prue as well. I don't know in what order you put your hands up, so shall we start with Pauline and go around the room?
Thank you. Couple of things on this. I've operated a few of these and designed a few of these. I think you need a concise, I think you need a 4 C's. I think you need a concise summary for management at the front. They're never going to follow this if it's 27 pages. They're just not going to reuse it. So I suggest that this is a good manual of good practice, but let's pull out the actual rules and the trigger points and make it really clear and keep it to 3 pages. And then the managers will use that, and then they can dip into this if they need to. I think that's the first point. The second question I had was about pattern absence. So are you going to do, how are the triggers triggered? How do managers know that they need to do this? And how do you know they've done it? And how do you monitor for pattern absence, like somebody taking the week of Wimbledon off every year, or somebody taking a Monday off every month, or, you know, that sort of thing? How do you monitor for that?
So we're working with our systems team. So our data, when the information about absence is input, obviously goes into our pay system because we have to record it for pay purposes. And then our system is designed to release reports. So it will release reports every month that would then be shared with the managers. There's responsibility of HR through this to make sure that managers are following that process and that they are doing what they are required to do under it. If we have any concerns that managers aren't, then that becomes, it would be escalated, and in terms that a manager isn't doing what their obligation is within the policy. So we have strong reporting procedures for that to manage the triggers. We would like to be in a position where I would design or see if the system would, when we're uploading information, it's then stored against the person's file, so we can see that it's been doing, it's sort of being done, and then we will be able to pull reports and correlate that data. And then for patterns of absence, I don't know how sophisticated our system is to do that, but I think that comes down to sort of working closely with that data and HR. As I said, there's a lot of obligation from us as a service to provide that support to them. I've worked in past authorities where I've had cases where somebody would have every school holiday off. That was then matched and mapped across, and we would cut. And I think it's that education of managers also to understand if somebody's having every Monday off or every single school holiday off, then how do we manage that? So I think it comes down to those workshops that we'll do for managers to give them those signs of what that could be, like you say, you know, having the same week every year off because it happens to coincide with Wimbledon. So it's all of that we'll do and educate through the workshops.
So I think you need potentially to help managers notice that sort of pattern absence. I mean, it might not be quite so bad when you haven't got 600 people working for you, but it's still easy to, if you're busy, it's easy to miss. And if you have captured all the data and you've got a track record of what the person's been doing, that will help.
Yeah, I think this is where I will say our structure of the business partners, they've got really strong relationships with the key managers. And as you say, as you start to break down those directorates then into services and then into teams, they know their teams well. And I think what we're getting much better at is people are getting better at asking or looking for sort of advice, etc., around some of these things. And the other thing that we are developing is we're looking at sort of bite-sized training on some of these core skills for management. So it's core skilled, and I say bite-sized because again, we don't want hours of it. It's just the pertinent points, so it makes it easy for people to understand what it is that they need to do. And then on top of that, it's then what I call sort of more skills, sort of a behavioural sort of side of things, of the difficult conversations sometimes that you need to be able to have and how you might be broaching some of that. So the policy will not be sitting in isolation. It's sitting in a much wider framework And as I say, we've still got developing some of this, but as I say, it's coming, and it will be there for some of these key policies.
I think my final bit of advice is make sure you've got something concise.
Yeah, part of it would be to have like a short line manager's guide to how to implement and deal with scenarios. We're looking at ways that we engage as well. So we've got potentially an opportunity to have drop-in sessions. So if there's certain things that managers want to share knowledge-wise across with peers, and we've got that ability to share it in a different arena as well. So there's lots that we've got planned to make sure that when we're implementing stuff like this, that it's really been embedded into the council.
Super, thank you very much. And I think the idea of having a concise guide to managers is really valuable. Sarah, I think you were next.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of tie into what Pauline was saying, it is extremely comprehensive. And I also agree that a concise guide and probably like ties in with the bite-sized training you were talking about, I think will sort of ease managers into it and maybe alleviate a little bit of the anxiety that sometimes come when you're being asked to monitor things as well. If I could also just tie in on the triggers, and I appreciate I may have missed something. I just noticed in the policy that in the definition of terms, there wasn't a definition of the term trigger. And I just also couldn't identify what will there be a glossary is the wrong word, but will there be sort of a key outline of what the triggers are as well? Because I couldn't quite identify that within the document. Yeah.
No, sorry, valid feedback about that. And I think that is sometimes when you're in your professional arena and you're writing stuff, you're writing it based on your view. So then having that feedback like that is that a glossary would help some of the terminology. I think it is in a couple of the other policies that we're looking at, we've got draft through, so it's making sure there's that consistency, but certainly we can look at including that about definitions.
Yeah, you have got some definitions in there. It's just that the trigger was missing.
Okay.
And just one other question on triggers, if you don't mind. So I just on page 28 on paragraph 3, it just talks about the fact that under certain circumstances, when reviewing absences against the trigger points, it may be necessary in exceptional circumstances for managers to use their discretion on what the triggers are. And so I just wanted to understand a bit more around that and how you'll get to a point where you might trust a manager to be able to identify trigger that they think is appropriate outside of what's maybe in their policy.
So how we would look at that is that's because you've got to sort of be fair under the Equality Act. So if somebody is falling under that definition of the Equality Act, or even if we have no confirmation that we always err on the side of caution that they could potentially be fitting of the definition under that. So I think if you had, as an example, and I won't name where it was, but a past case that I had, we would have had an employee that would have breached the triggers completely and would have had 8 absences in a 12-month period, quite significant. They met the definition of the Equality Act. However, when we looked at the detail, and this was HR supporting the service to do it, their absences didn't relate to anything that was actually to do with their disability. So it then comes about those adjustments, and the relaxation could be if you had a disability and you had 4 absences that were related to your disability, but then you only had 1 that was none, you would give the discretion because it could be deemed harsh. So that's how we would apply it. And as an organisation, we are fairly lucky with the headcount here. So we know that through working closely, as Louise has said, the relationships that we have within HR, we tend to know a lot of the detail, or where we've got colleagues that may have a disability, so we will work closely with those managers and make that decision. And that's the balance of fairness, because if we had to make a decision, worst case scenario, that their absence was too much for us to sustain, and then it went further, we could demonstrate then the fairness under the Equality Act that we did relax those triggers, and we recognised that somebody had a disability but we didn't count it and they were still breaching it. So that's about that point, is that adjustment into fairness for people that could potentially fall under that Equality Act.
Thank you.
Hopefully that makes sense.
No, that's really helpful. Yeah, no, that absolutely, that puts real context around it. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Stephen.
you. I was also going to ask a very similar question to Sarah about the triggers. I just wanted to clarify, absolutely, certainly, that the discretion is only to effectively not apply the triggers. There would be no discretion to apply them earlier or apply them at a lesser level.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about the non-application of potentially saying to somebody that your absence is too much for us as an organisation, and now we would give the discretion on that basis. We wouldn't apply it.
I wonder whether you just need to just tweak the wording a little, because at the moment it says when reviewing absences against the trigger points, it may be necessary in exceptional circumstances for managers to use their discretion on what the triggers are.
Change the word.
That could imply
It
that
could
you
go
don't.
up or down.
Yeah, it's either. Discretion could go in either direction.
Within the limit.
I think
Yeah, because I'm finished my.
No, sorry, I was
speaking, but-
trying to suggest a word that was up.
No, go on, go for what? Yes, yeah. I mean, the main thing I would say, this is a phenomenally detailed and impressive piece of work, and it seems to me, from my perspective, very comprehensive. So thank you very much for all the work you've put in, both of you, and no doubt your team. Like all really important documents, you wonder why we didn't have such a thing before. It seems quite remarkable in many ways. We've not had a policy like this before, and it seems like quite an omission that we haven't had one.
It was a little bit of a surprise. There was some guidance, so it's not saying there wasn't some guidance, but it is an unusual situation.
Yeah, I was slightly surprised when I joined as well. I think, as Louise correctly said, there is a piece of guidance, but that's then pinned to the capability policy.
Yeah.
And I think feedback
Yeah.
that I've had over the years, and actually very recently here, is that if you're dealing with me under your capability policy, you're basically saying I'm not capable of doing my job, where actually my health's not permitting me to do my job. So which is why having that separate supporting your attendance at work policy, it shows then that we're doing as much as we can to help you, but sometimes we need to be in this position. But actually we're not questioning you as an individual. You've done nothing wrong. It's just your health's not allowing you. And I think that's been important feedback to hear from people, is that you're inferring by saying it's capability that I'm rubbish at my job, which we don't want people to think at all. So it is, I think it's modernising it and bringing it forward. I know it's very chunky policy, but a lot of the stuff is absolutely stuff that we need there underpinning to.
It is absolutely necessary to have it, and to have it as comprehensively presented as this is. What I really was impressed by was that you strike a very good balance between defending the interests of the employee and defending the interests of the organisation, and that's obviously the balance that needs to be struck here. I just wanted to ask, if I may, a question which is based purely on ignorance. On page 26, we've got sick leave entitlements, and obviously they rash it up with the level of service. Are these comparable to what other local authorities provide? Are we, in benchmarking terms, are we now at a level of parity with others?
Yeah, so we are signed as a council up to national terms and conditions, and it's something called the NJC terms and conditions, which is more commonly known as the Green Book. So within that Green Book, it sets certain things out, standard things such as sick pay, your maternity entitlement, other sort of statutory things like that are common across councils. So this is no different to any other council that is signed up to the Green Book. You do get councils that come away and have local terms and conditions, but it's not something that we are doing as a council. We have the national ones because they bargain collectively for us when it comes to everything else. So it is, sick pay is as across, I would think,
That's
a couple of hundred councils.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
quite a lot of councils signed up to
Yeah.
national.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very much.
Can I add just one comment actually before we go on to Prue, and that is, and Yusra, and that is that I know that Louise and Sally have been on a journey in this council, and part of that journey is a review of the policies, and you know, with regard to the urgencies of the policies, we are now going through and updating all of them, which is where this one I know got identified. So I think Prue, you were next.
I think various people covered 90% of what I was to ask about, all of which is important. The bits that are left are really about the implementation. I'm encouraged by the fact you talk about workshops and managers and so on. So there are a few scenarios that I can imagine which will be more difficult to handle than others. And one is where there's bullying and the member of staff is absent for that reason. And particularly if the manager that's handling their absence policy is responsible for the bullying. How are you going to spot that?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, we do have a sort of it's whistleblowing's now an alter.
Dignity.
Dignity. No, it's
It will be dignity at work.
Yeah, it's dignity at work, but also whistleblowing is also the mechanism for being able to go round your manager. I mean it from that perspective, with regard to giving them a pathway. And I suppose this is where it comes back to your core training around all. So it's just not about absence management, as you've said. It's got to be about the whole piece and the whole framework. But this is also why we have our unions in place. We have the consultation panel. We also have our service level forums. So again, there's representatives in different places so that different people have got different places to go to bring up their concern, which all comes back centrally into us from the point of view of them being able to provide the support.
Before Susan looks totally hot for, I'm not trying to suggest that many of our managers are bullies, but I can envisage a situation in which something like that could happen theoretically. Yep.
And it's making sure you've got enough avenues for people to know there's different places to go. I mean, it's even down to our mental health first aiders, for example. You know, they're not there to deal with the issue, but they can be a really good point of contact for people to initially make contact.
So the last little tiny bit is, you've talked about the training for managers. How are you going to communicate this to the staff in general?
We've got a planned sort of engagement cycle now we work with internal comms, so we have a lot of opportunities to be able to work with colleagues and sharing these changes. We aren't shy, either of us, in going on to things like our big chat and saying that this is what we've got coming up. We're looking at how we change our approach to make people aware that we've got stuff coming through. We're looking at HR surgeries, then that will be, people will have the ability to drop in and talk to us or hear what we're going to be doing. And it's just, I think we've both been here now over 18 months, and it's that ability to really look at these things now and then implement and engage with the workforce and our colleagues about it, reassuring them that whilst we have to have things, we act in everyone's best interest. It's not just about the council, it's also about them as colleagues. So we've got a lot of engagement plans.
Yeah, I mean, there are now a lot of groups in place. It's even down to breaking barriers down. You know, we had our colleague conference, and I think a lot of our colleagues were really positive about the question and answer session, where the directors and leader, you were there to talk to, and actually I think that meant a lot. So I think it's just that thing of people then knowing that they've got that access. They don't need permission for that access. And as I say, we're going to continue to drive forward that transparency piece through the work we're doing with the people strategy as well.
You're making a huge difference in that 18 months, I would say.
Yes, my question, first of all, is a lot of hard work here. I can see so many, things are already, elements are in the policies here. So it's just few things. On page 22, there is attendance management, employee responsibilities. I love the concept of flow chart. It's really understandable. So like I think if we add more flow charts or maybe bar charts, yeah, so it will be easier to understand. Although it is really a comprehensive policy already you have shared, yeah, but it's just a suggestion, yeah. So yeah, and yeah, first I think you reply me, and then I will have more questions. Yeah.
I think that's something that we would plan to do. So if you see a flow chart in there, it's how we would extract it as a separate document. So on our HR hub, they don't then have to read through the whole policy to get to a certain point. The flow charts will be separate. They will be published separately. We will potentially put them in like a manager's guide as an appendix. So you've got that quick reference. So they are a lot easier to follow and make sure that you know which sort of direction you're traveling at certain stages. So it would be pulled out as a separate document to save people having to look through it all.
Great, yeah. How many years does it take to have review the policy? Yeah, like is there any benchmark that you have set? That, okay, this is for 2 years or maybe 3 years, and then we will review it and then we will update this, yeah? Or is there any requirement? Obviously, yeah, the requirement can come up anytime, yeah?
There isn't a requirement. We need to go through, and I want us to have gone through our whole policies, just, you know, because I'm not saying every single one needs to come in here either. You know, not all the policies need changing. I suppose for me, what I would like us to get into with our major policies, I'd like to see it every 3 years. I'd like to make sure there is a review every 3 years, other than when legislation obviously dictates that we've got to make changes. So that will become our norm. And what I will look to be doing is, you know, they will build us, my words are coming to me today, a register of our policies, so we can easily see what dates things have happened on, so that everyone can see that, and it becomes then our normal, basically becomes our normal practice.
And so it's almost like 3 years.
Yes, would be for our major.
For the major ones,
Yeah.
I think that's based on feedback. The register was talking to our union, saying things can be really difficult to find and see how they are up to date. So what we then think is if we publish the register with the last date as the review of that policy
And a link.
and a link to it, so we're taking them to the right version. Obviously, if legislation changes, we have to update our policies for legislation purposes. So they are just done as and when, because legislation dictates that. But with a brand new policy like this one, because we don't have anything, I think for me that initial 12 months sort of settling in, talking to services, how is it working? Are there any concerns? What's not going well? What's working well is really important. Then if we have fundamental changes or we need to revisit something, we absolutely would do that with something that's so big to us. We are really lucky as a council. Our absence rates aren't significant. We're only just above our target, whereas some other authorities do have quite serious absence rates, really high. I just think that this will just be more about support for a lot of people, and a lot of the work's already been done by a lot of our managers. It's just cementing that and firming our position where we're at with certain things, about expectations more than anything.
And just sort of finish, and I know this will not what was asked, but also kindness can still be how we deliver our policy, and that is very much at the core of what we're delivering. Because you know, it's important, as I say, for our colleagues who are going through a difficult time.
That's exactly what it's about. I've met with somebody today and I've had a follow-up email, and I've applied what I think is good practice and the best practice and the right thing to do. And they've actually come back and said, thank you for taking your time to talk to me. Were you really empathetic with my situation? And that's what I want. You know, we're human. We're not here to sort of say you will do this. It's not black and white. Everyone's situation is very different, and that's why I think we're both probably in that
fashion. This is the HR responsibility, obviously, because being empathetic is really important. Yeah. Otherwise, it is really difficult to cope up, and for everyone. Yeah.
I think perception sometimes is HR's only there for the organisation or for managers. We're not. We're there for everyone. So I want people to be treated fairly and absolutely with kindness. So that's, you know, the fair balance and having that approach.
The fairness and the kindness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this policy, what was the old version of this policy? There is nothing. It's just a brand new thing.
Absolutely nothing.
Okay. So I'm the lucky one about this. Okay, all right. Yeah.
If we bring anything through, when we've got final versions where we're ready, we would share any current version. So one of the other ones is purely a draft, and that's just to gauge some initial feedback. But with this, we don't have anything. We have, I think, not even one page, like a half page.
So how you were implementing those
We
things?
go with good.
Obviously, it's a past, yeah, it's nothing to do with.
Yeah, we go
the
with
present
good.
situation.
We follow, as long as we're following ACAS from a fair process and their good practice. That's what I've been encouraging managers to do for the time being until we can get this through. They've been sort of tying it into capability. But as I've sort of said before, for me, it's how does that then feel as an employee experience? You know, when you're telling me I'm not well enough, I can't return because of my health, but I'm more than capable of doing my job. So yeah, we've not had anything before.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sarah.
Sorry, just one small thing from me, and it's only because I feel quite strongly about this, and it kind of applies to me, so I'm getting to that age. You know how you brought out some, like in the appendixes, about specifically managing stress or mental health? Would you consider a menopause policy?
Sorry. We, through our colleague conference, had a question from one of our colleagues, and we're going to have a menopause support group that we're setting up. But we're also working with our partners, Places Leisure, who are also running courses, and we are promoting that through into the council. So yes, it's a really important area, and again, we'll probably be looking at some sort of training as well, because it's just demystifying certain things for people, I think at times.
I don't know if I'm wholly sold on a bespoke policy when it comes to menopause, because we could have a policy then for every single situation. I think we can certainly look at maybe a section on it, but what I want to do is get some education sessions for line managers, particularly our male line managers that may not feel comfortable in having those conversations. If we think of our profile of our workforce, we are predominantly female. So I know from speaking to a couple of colleagues saying I don't really feel comfortable talking to my line manager because he's a man and I think he might be put off talking to me. So I'm trying to encourage them to do it, but by having those sections there, or almost some guidance and those training sessions and educating people about how to talk to colleagues about the menopause, that's the sort of immediate direction of travel for us as an authority.
Thank you. That's really encouraging.
Super, thank you very much, Sarah. And Pauline.
Just one final thought you prompted in me. I agree completely that capability and absence are completely different things, but don't forget that sometimes capability can trigger absence. So if you're not up to your job, sometimes people find an easy way out is to go off sick rather than actually confronting the issue. So I think there should be some read across, even if I agree it's separate, but it's just a thought really.
I was just going to say, absolutely. So this is back to how we interrelate back in with our training, in the fact that it's not, a policy should never be sitting on its own, that you should be always looking at the different scenarios depending on a lot of the time what the information is also telling you, because your data and information will be telling you a lot. But no, it's a fair comment, and as I say, we will be making sure we pick that up.
There'll also be crossovers, so there'll be some policies like the annual leave. It'll say if you don't comply, this could constitute disciplinary, and then it'll be replicated into disciplinary to say that this section. So it's about having that thread through where there is commonality, because we talk about medical capability. That is still some wording that's out and about there, and it is almost that medical capability is absolutely saying you're not well, and we would then look at other options. So yeah, completely. It's about having that thread through all of them and not being treated in isolation.
And the final thing, which probably may not be relevant here, but how do these triggers and information stay on people's records? Because people moving between departments, you don't want to lose the threads.
They would stay on their file. So if somebody had poor absence and was moving into another service, that would move. The new manager will be able to see all the information on there. And we've just recently changed our reference processes. We do not discuss absence in it because it'd be classed as discriminatory. So we've got completely changed processes. So we don't declare anything like that either.
I mean, I think most companies have got to the point where they only say, yes, did they work there, or no, they didn't. And these are the dates.
It's the context behind that absence. So if we started to declare that information and somebody had a disability, then it's putting us in a difficult position. So we're looking at policies, but then looking at all of our processes.
I'm surprised you give any references at all. Most people don't, apart from to say that, yes, they worked for us. I don't know what your experience is, Rachel, but
for safeguarding basic information. So.
Yeah, good.
Are there any final questions or comments? Super. So are we happy to move with the recommendation? We've given our comments and we agree the supporting attendance at work policy so that it can be finalised, published and rolled out. So yeah, through seconding, all those in favour. So I think that's unanimous. So thank you very much for that that huge piece of work. We've got another one, item 21 is also a policy and also a major and important policy, which is organisational change. Now, this is one, as I understand it, we do have an organisational change policy at the moment, and what you're looking to do is to update and to change it.
Yeah, we do have a policy in place. It isn't, in my view, robust enough. So what we are trying to do, given the fact that we're looking at different change processes within the organisation, is almost bring a brand new policy through to try and replace that, to strengthen it, to support people, have clearer guidance. This is the initial draft. It hasn't yet gone to consultation because I'm trying to sort of see whether or not which way is working best. Do we come here, look at feedback? It's been to corporate leadership team. And then we do that piece of work. So for me, this again is I would like to say probably enhanced a lot of what we've got in place at the moment.
Yes,
so
definitely. Yeah. Again, I'd say it's about the right level of support for our managers. Again, they do not do this on their own. This is not a process that we expect our managers to do on their own, but they do play a large role in it. HR will always be there to guide around this, and to the point that Sally will sign off or I will sign off on a consultation before it actually starts, because again, we're wanting to make sure there's consistency, and a lot of what this policy is doing is bringing about consistency in approach. Again, it's quite detailed with regard to what I feel this is one area where you do need that level of detail. I think if there are grey areas, that's not just for the council as the employer, but it's also for the employees who are obviously going through that process as well, because it just gives them hopefully a level of confidence with regard to the process, because the process is about fairness, transparency, and again, consistency across the board.
And a lot of the changes within this are based on feedback that we've had throughout processes over the last 18 months, where I've been working on certain scenarios with managers and like, right, what does the policy say? And it doesn't say anything, it's silent on it, which puts us in a difficult position because we don't have anything concrete that we can then use when we're justifying a decision that we've made. So a lot of this is based on feedback, and a lot of it's technical stuff that we have to do as an organisation. We have to follow certain guidance when it comes to pensions and all of that. We've got no control over anything to do with the pensions. So it's just about making sure that we've got that best information there for managers and our colleagues when we're in a reorganisation position.
And can I add one more thing before we go to Pauline and then to Stephen? And we have had a conversation about this. This is a policy which is, as Sally was saying, it's at a much earlier stage than one that we looked at earlier. And there have been some changes in the law, either case law or statute recently, and that is something which will, of course, be taken into consideration when we look at this. So, Pauline.
Thank you. That was one of the points I was going to mention. The one thing I couldn't see in here was any reference to HR1s and any warning about not entering consultation by accident before you're ready, and then ending up with, all the timescales. And I can't remember now. It's 2 years since I've done it, but you've got the 30, and when the clock starts, and what you don't say and what you do say before the clock started and not accidentally triggering the clock before you need it to start. That seems to be a bit silent on that. I'm not sure whether I just missed it. Oh.
There is a section, a very small section that on page 69 that does say where applicable, the council will write to central government to notify them of the proposed redundancies and supply the HR1 to the trade unions. So it isn't there in that detail. And I think what I would probably need to do is have a separate document that has that detail. I wouldn't necessarily include that in the policy, but I'm open for feedback on that.
I think the key thing is making sure that managers are aware of all the timescales and not triggering them by accident. That's the key thing. You don't want to walk into a start of consultation when you haven't. Or even there's all sorts of legal minefields. And I think the danger with this is it's a bit hidden. And actually, it should have red flashing lights on the front of it, which says don't start any of this without blah, 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 blah.
Just to reassure you, as Louise referred to before, nothing starts without our approval as head of service and AD, and we track the numbers ourselves. So if we know the proposed number will breach at a certain point, then we will either make an adjustment if we have to. As you can imagine, some things do get delayed because we're looking at final stages of stuff not being quite ready, or there's a change in the demand of that service. So we are actively monitoring that all the time to make sure we don't go against the HR1 guidance.
I think you should just beef this up just slightly, just to make sure that it's right at the front, that it's clear that you don't start this process on your own because it's a Friday and you fancy it. If you know what I mean, and that there's things you've got to be aware of that could land you in deep trouble.
Yeah, all I'm going to say is that I will be, there's not many managers that will take the initiative and start this one on their own, but it's a very, very good point. And I think a lot of it is, I suppose it's the danger of having, if you've got maybe a close working relationship with your team, start to share information because you're used to doing that. Where actually this sometimes can be one of those scenarios where you do have to step back as the manager and have to take quite a different sort of position. But I think this comes back to, and I know I sound like a broken record tonight, back to our framework of training again, and especially around consultation, because it's understanding those changes and the implications of what you're actually doing.
And it just in this case, because it's sort of going through all the steps, I think I'd put something at the front that's clear about that.
Happy, yeah.
And what I very often put up front, as you said, Pauline, is wording to the effect of, you know, if you are concerned that the workload may not support the number of staff that you have, or that you may need a reorganisation, it is important that you speak to HR at the earliest possible stage. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, a big thank you for all the work that's gone into this. It's very substantial. Although this time you had something to work from, it's still very clear that you've done a lot of new work and new thinking about this. And in fact, it's highlighted for us at one point. I think it's page 78 on the agenda on the salary protection. We have a nice little bit just reminding us that something's changed, because you've got underlined, or rather highlighted in yellow, currently for employees who move down a role and therefore normally would move to lower pay, we have this salary protection scheme. Currently it's 18 months of salary protection. You're now suggesting it would be 12 months, is that correct?
Yeah, I think in the main the policy strengthens everything we've already got, so it makes things a lot more robust and clearer. The only significant proposed amendment from the existing policy would be for us to review that pay protection period. At the moment we offer 100% for 12 months, and then we offer 50% for 6 months. Again,
So
benchmark, it does, but benchmarking against other councils and what they would do, good practice, typically we'll see a 12-month pay protection period. I'm not saying that that's set and we have to change it. It's part of that consultation process.
And that's why we've highlighted it, because it will be something we will definitely be talking to our unions about and colleagues about, and be quite transparent about it.
Be aware of it and comfortable with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to add, my previous council, we went through this same change, and I did the benchmarking then, and we moved from 2 years to 1 year. So because when we did benchmark, we were sort of out on a limb
were
with
out, yeah,
regard. It
yeah,
was quite,
yeah.
it's quite an
So
old-fashioned
was the
approach.
2 years at full pay or?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Goodness,
So,
right.
you know, and again, it comes back to, you know, times have changed and things have moved on, and actually that particular policy hadn't been reviewed for quite a period of time. So it's very much, as I say, in keeping with the norm now, is I think would say more with the year.
Yeah, and I think that's what, when we are looking at this, we do rely on benchmarking to make sure that we're not completely going off, you know, and making it too potentially small, or equally looking at, you know, if we are generous, making sure that we're more aligned given the change in sort of financial positions, really.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Obviously, it'd be interesting to see what responses there are to that, but up from everything you said, the 12 months seems to be the norm. So let's see how people react. The other point I wanted to raise was again about comparisons with other councils in terms of redundancy pay. You could helpfully provided a table, which I think I eventually worked out how to understand. Clearly, the key is to have done a lot of years service and be over 60, and then you're in clover. But is that a standard approach that's adopted by all councils or nearly all councils?
So the current, the one that's in here, the proposed one, is actually what we currently do at the moment. My previous councils both offered enhanced redundancy packages. I think my first council was a 1.5 multiplier on your redundancy, so basically got half a gain. And my previous council doubled it.
Yeah.
A lot of councils are going with the route of sticking with the statutory, which is what we do. Also, what we a bit that I talked about not having any control over is under the pension scheme, if you're 55, it automatically triggers your pension if you're made redundant. We have no way to change that. That is national pension legislation. So if, in the interest of transparency, how it works is that if the council makes that individual redundancy, the council has to withstand cost against the pension. So that's why my previous council was negotiating to remove that enhancement on the redundancy, because they were then having to pay pension costs. And that's how the pension scheme works. We have no ability to change that, but we do have control over the redundancy offer that we have. So we do offer the statutory. We don't offer any enhancements. So I think your previous council did it?
It had an enhanced.
It
had the enhanced, but it came down from 2 to 1.5,
Yeah.
I think.
So one of my previous, the enhanced offer, they actually changed it. So if you were then pensionable, you didn't get the enhanced, you got flat rate statutory redundancy, because the council is having to pay the pension costs. And that's I'll say that's how it's out of control.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
We've got Fran and Pauline.
Yep. Stephen asked my first question. And just to pick up a point which wasn't in my question, but when it comes to considering pension things, we don't exercise any of our discretions to give more pension, and I hope that's clear somewhere, because we've never have.
Yes. We don't. I think councils have a lot more processes in place. The whole retirement and sort of discretionary bits is something we're working on to make it more robust.
But to be quite clear, no, we do not exercise discretions. And if we did, there is a very clear set route of the sign off that it has to come into personnel board with regard to any of that. So, but we have to set out our discretions, because that's something that we're required to do through the pension scheme. But it's something we'll be looking at with finance, because again, as part of our general policy review, our pension discretions need to be something that again are transparent, because it's quite clear that no, we do not look to pay, because once you set a precedent, you will be finding yourself with higher costs.
However sad you are for somebody, no, we can't do it. I've got 3 sort of bitty points. The first one, they're all, 2 of them on page 79. So at the top of page 79, it says employees are normally expected to work throughout the notice period. and garden leave is not permitted at the council except in exceptional circumstances. What sort of exceptional circumstances?
Well, basically, it's if they could do harm through the access that they maybe have to certain information.
Yeah.
Again, normally, again, this is quite normal in the fact that most people do have to work their notice period.
I'm not arguing that they shouldn't have to work it.
But the only
It's about
time,
protecting the council.
yeah.
So if they're going, if we know potentially they could, well, in their role, they've got access to privileged information that they could then go on and use elsewhere. It's at that point where we would say, we would like you to go on garden leave.
It's rare.
It's rare it happens, but there may be the odd case. It depends on what role they're in.
It's better to have the clause, to have the option than not to have it.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to have the option. I think you might need to spell out what the exceptional circumstances a bit more. And then in the following sentence, I've just noticed, and this is a very bitty one, is that you've got payment in lieu of notice can be considered. I think you mean cannot be considered, do you? Because it says except in exceptional circumstances at the end.
We would consider payment in lieu of notice in exceptional
Right,
circumstances.
so you need to take out the word except then, because you've got that in the.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then the third point was none of this does anything to change the triggers under which organisational changes have to come to personnel board. No.
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 If we make any of those changes, that's a change to the constitution, and that would be an item that we'll be looking at personnel board next month. So as I say, because there's a whole review going on, isn't there, on the constitution? So, but no, we would not be making any changes to that until we would at this.
Stephen and I will have the joy of that at Constitution Review Working Group.
Fantastic. I think we've got Pauline and then Sarah and then Stephen and Yusra. I'm going to have to write all of this down. You kind of indicated that at least some of what you were wanting to ask had been answered. Is there anything else that you wanted to raise?
Sorry, yeah, two things. Just to follow up from Prue's point, which was the first question I had was about discretion. If you don't exercise discretion, why is there a cost of allowing people to retire at 55? I don't understand that.
That rule within the actual pension scheme. That is actually a standard rule within the pension scheme. It used to be 50. That changed.
No, I understand that, but I don't understand why there's a cost to the council.
So if we say that we support that discretionary element in that person being released, the council's making that decision.
You just said, sorry, when you talked about people taking early retirement, you said there is a cost to the council, and then you said to Prue, we don't use discretion very often.
No, that was to do with redundancy. So we have to, if anyone is 55 or over and made redundant, we have to pay that on redundancy. That's in the LGPS.
Pay what?
Any costs that
Pension strain.
Pension strain.
What cost would there be there? So if you're not uplifting their pension, and if you retire at 55, you get what you would get if you retired at 55. Why is there a cost?
It's because the council's making that decision about that about that employee, so it pays out as if it basically, if you went naturally at 55, you take the hit on your pension. As if I was 55 and made the decision to leave, then I would suffer the reduction on my pension. But because that decision isn't being made by me, there's legislation within the pension scheme that says the council is making that decision. So that employee could be in detriment.
So you're uplifting people's pensions who leave at 55 to their normal retirement date. Is that what you're telling me?
It's. I don't think it's a full hit.
It's not classed as an uplift.
Because that's what I was thinking Prue was talking about.
No. I think what would be best to do is, I think, let's get our definitions right, and just put that back into the committee, because it's definitely not an uplift. And I've always questioned this because I've always thought it sounds like that. Absolutely, but it's a strain because they've started to obviously take the pension early. So I understand what you're saying. It sounds like, let me get the definition clear, because I'm just going to talk us round in circles.
Is this around actuarial reduction, and you're not applying an actuarial reduction? I think that's what it is, but we will come back to Pauline with some more information.
Yeah, okay, I understand. Thank you, Rachel. But yeah, it would be useful to get a bit of information. And the final thing, which I've fallen over in the past under salary protection on item 12, is if the person is on a scale point, because all your people are on scale points, and they get a reduction, and therefore they were, say, on whatever it is salary with a scale point 12, and they go to a lower salary and a different scale point. If their scale point on their original salary increases, do they get that increase or do they not?
They get the cost.
They get
The cost of living, but they wouldn't continue to move up.
So
the
yes, they
grades.
do get that.
Yeah.
The experience I've had before is that you end up with, you can say your protected salary is frozen and you do not get any uplifts, and on the time that your salary is protected, you leave that salary frozen. And I think that's not a bad thing to think about.
I have come across that in my first council. They actually did that because it was about minimising the impact to the authority, and it was about the pay detriment situation. So
the key thing is the person's still getting a protected salary, but the council, it is getting eaten away as inflationary increases occur. So I think it's worth thinking about. I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, but it's probably, my experience was it was better to do that than the alternative, because it can be quite expensive.
Fantastic, thank you. I think, have I got this right? We've got Sarah and then Yusra.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just a question from, just slightly below that actually, on page 79, on the right time off to seek alternative employment. It says that employees with 2 years service under notice of dismissal by reason of redundancy are entitled to take reasonable time off. And then later on it said it is the policy of the council that all employees under notice of dismissal shall be provided with reasonable paid time off. So I just wanted that distinction between if you've got over 2 years being entitled to it, but that everybody can access that anyway. I could be confused.
I think there's a word, because you're only being made redundant if you've got that 2 years. So I think there's a couple of words missing in that. I need to relook at that. It is only the first draft of this, so yeah, I'll take that feedback and go and have a look at it. There is a provision again under the green book where people are allowed reasonable time off to go and look for other work, and again that's a long-standing thing. I'm used to it being capped to so many days as well, so I'll take those points away, Councillor Brown, back to.
Thank you.
Super, thank you. And Yusra.
Regards to this policy, do you consult human resource business partners as well, HRBP, because it's a redundancy and the organizational changes as well? So do you consult first and then it comes into personnel board? How does that work here?
So the HR business partners are involved in our policy development. So they would be involved in that initial piece of work. And any iterations of that, we will give them that feedback as well, so they have that opportunity to comment. Again, they're the ones that are implementing and working with managers, so it's really valuable to get their feedback as part of it to make sure that whatever we're looking at implementing accurately reflects anything they've experienced. And it's not been, so the policy at the moment isn't detailed, so talking to the team, I get that understanding of right, what's happened in this situation and where do we need to strengthen it, hence us coming back in with a bigger policy now. So
I think the other part of that question was not all redundancies come into personnel board. There is a trigger point which is written within the constitution which sets out when we need to be informing.
So is it tier 1, 2, 3, which level?
No, it's numbers of people that are potentially looking to be made redundant, and this is one of the things that we're going to be looking at talking to yourselves about with regard to that as part of the constitution review. But yeah, so again, what we're looking at is we're looking to use the set standards set by national government around consultation, and when we start to hit markers, so if we're going to have to do an HR1, for example, then we should be probably starting to get into the realms of obviously councillors being aware and that coming into personnel board. So again, we'll just use that as our opportunity to just update and talk to you about that as our ideas at the moment. Okay. But it's set out in the constitution.
Thank you.
Super, thank you very much. Were there any other questions on this? You don't have any longer. I just had one question, and that is both for this one and for the previous policy. We talk about schools who, of course, control their own policies can nevertheless make use of these council policies. And of course, I think probably particularly for the earlier one, which is so comprehensive, I think that would be very useful. What steps do we take to make sure that schools are aware of these?
So we have our traded services, and that includes an HR, 2 HR colleagues that work with our schools. Now, with regard to schools, they adopt their own policies, but we will always provide model policies, and this could be a model policy that they could then adapt and their governors could look to share. But the traded service, so the HR colleagues sit within our own team, so they are all part of obviously the development of our policies, so would use that as when needed.
I think the head teachers could adopt this policy, but not or maybe the board members, but not the teachers yet. That's my understanding.
It's about the core staff, because teachers are on different
terms and
conditions.
Yeah.
So we would say that the council's policy could be good practice, but it's entirely up to the school what they do with their policy. Sometimes they do it for ease. Sometimes they also have their own HR people that write their own. So yeah, it just depends with schools.
Super, thank you very much. So I think we're ready to propose that we adopt the recommendation on page 59. We've given comments on it, so will Personnel Board agree the contents of the policy to enable progression to final consultation and implementation?
Subject to the comments that we've made?
Yes, the comments that we made have been taken down and will be taken into consideration as it moves to the next stage, as I understand it, and Sally is nodding there.
Yeah, absolutely, we'll take on board those comments. I think there's some really valuable feedback from you all this evening, just in terms of some of those processes, and actually it's already got me thinking about my next lot of policies. So particularly when it comes to pensions and discretionary payments and all of that, it's just to make it clearer. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just think you need to add that to the recommendation.
Super. So our recommendation is that the Personnel Board has made comments tonight. Those comments will be taken into account as we agree that the contents of the policy will progress to final consultation and implementation. Super. Okie dokie. So I think I proposed, Pauline seconded, and everybody has agreed that. Super. Thank you very much. I think Louise is going to leave us now for this final item, and I have been told that I can leave out 22. We don't need to exclude the public, so we go straight on to item number 23, which is the target operating model for Tier 3. Thank you.
Oh, I've just got water everywhere. Okay. Thanks very much for that. So I'll try not to let the water divert my attention now. So in terms of this report, what you've got in front of you, it's on page 89. So this relates to Tier 3, that's our assistant directors. And this report is about changing the operating model for the assistant directors at that level. So what this is to do is to enable us to recruit and retain the staff that we have. So it's really important for our senior leadership roles, and ensure that we're better placed in terms of the local sort of job market. And as an employee, we've got really sort of strong leadership team as well. So you can see from the recommendations that what some of the key things, I'll go through the detail of the report in a moment, but in terms of what's been recommended here is we've currently got assistant director roles, and it's been recommended that they're changed to service director roles. That really has an impact in terms of, as I say, actually recruiting as well as that retention point. And we're looking to amend the pay range as well for our assistant directors, and there's more detail in the report about that. And to reach the level that we've put forward in terms of pay rate, we've looked at other Berkshire local authorities, what those salaries are paid at, and we've put forward a recommendation that's what we consider to be middle of the table in terms of the highest salary point for the what will be service director roles. Because I think it's really important that when we talk about retention and attracting people, when we can't attract, it means that we need to pay interims as well. So that's something that you've talked about previously about the cost of interims, and so that is why this is important. And also what we're having to do right now, and again this is in the report itself, is that we pay a particular salary according to a particular point, but we then have to pay a market supplement. I think we're paying market supplements to 7 of our assistant directors already. So what this is doing is also recommending that everybody is moved, all the assistant directors are moved to the service director roles. And at the same time, it goes through a consultation process. We need to actually do that with the current ADs. Having said that, the ADs have been involved in the process as well, and Sally could probably say more about that in a moment. So this is not a done to process. It's very much a where the assistant directors have been involved, and I think that what's core here is that it's really a step forward in terms of accountability and responsibility as corporately, and I know our assistant directors work on that level already, but this is about setting out that expectation very, very clearly for this in regards to this change. So if I move my report, which is very weak, to the next page, so the detail itself in the report talks to you about the number of directors. So we've reduced the number of directors. We had about 19 directors in 2023, now have 16 assistant directors. And it talks about the different pay scales that we have right now for those assistant directors. And we've got 14 currently at the higher assistant director rate, which is the current rate that we have in the council, and 2 at the lower sort of pay band of SM3. Having said that, as I've said, we've got these market supplements. So in the report, you've got a table as to the salaries, the average salaries of our sort of peer authorities in Berkshire. So you can see and the table is very much about the current difference, and so you can see that right now there is a big difference when you compare our lowest salary point for assistant directors and the highest salary point for assistant directors. So and I think in actual fact this table talks in particular about the highest salary point and talks about the difference. So there's quite a difference in all of the councils when we compare ourselves. So taking all of that into account, taking into account the market supplements that we already pay, taking into account the directorate pressures. So I think for me it's really important to have the message in here about from the directors about what they feel the pressures are for their organisations, for their departments, if they're not being able to pay the salaries to the assistant directors, what they think they should be paid, and compared to the market. So this in particular report talks about obviously we face big financial pressures as an organisation, and we've got to have the right people to actually take us forward. So we've got a reduced number of assistant directors, and it's about having the right calibre of people in the particular circumstances that we're facing right now financially. And the report also talks about children's services as an example, and how regulated children's services is, and it's a real fact that right across the country it's really difficult to attract talent in that area. It's really important that we have talent in that area, and I think although adult services is not mentioned again, knowing about what's on the horizon in terms of regulation for adult services, and also the many responsibilities that are not dissimilar in terms of, particularly around safeguarding with children's. So there's there's a lot of rationale in there as to why we need to actually make this change in terms of the grading for our assistant directors, and also change the name to service directors as well. So hopefully that helps. There's also a number of appendices. You've got the job description, which is the template, and the full definition of what we've called corporate shared responsibilities. I think what we're thinking about is changing it to shared accountabilities to get that that across about the importance of accountability, and then there's an assessment framework as well. So hopefully that gives you a flavour, but I'm sure you've got questions with regards to this report.
Stephen.
First of all, really to say that I think this is a good idea. I support it. I can see entirely that service director, well, once it was explained to me, I could see that service director has an obvious meaning to some people, whereas assistant director clearly sounds like an assistant. It sounds, and I imagine for people coming from other authorities, it can be quite confusing. So service director clearly is going to help with recruitment. I presume it's not going to make any difference to retention, but it will help with recruitment. The changing of the pay structure, I think, will definitely help with recruitment and retention. Certainly the market supplement idea, which helps you retain staff, can't presumably offer a market supplement when you're advertising. You just advertise the basic range.
You can, however, and I'm sure Sally will correct me if I'm wrong here, that if somebody's looking at an advert, they know a market supplement can be taken away. I think that's the key point.
Yeah.
So that they can't rely on it.
No. So the market supplement doesn't act as an incentive to apply for a job. It may help you stay in a job, but clearly, if we're now effectively competing on a more level playing field with the other Berkshire authorities in particular and other authorities beyond Berkshire, that must be a good thing. It is a challenge for us, especially given Bracknell's proximity in Bracknell, paying out of London, waiting. So we're always at a disadvantage. So I think this is important. And I think I'm right in saying Pauline made the suggestion in relation to the performance element. And for that, I thank you, because I think this is a very good idea. It does strengthen this process. So I'm very happy with it. And I hope everyone else will feel the same.
Just one minor point. I think we do need to make sure that it's really clear the link to performance and the link to increments. But the other point in here is the thing that doesn't leap out at me is there's a lot about innovation and systems and process thinking and all that sort of stuff. But there needs to be something, I think, and maybe it's in here and I've missed it, about understanding the impact of any change you'd make in your department to other departments in the council, and having a cross-council viewpoint, because you can see people changing stuff in their bit, which makes their life easier and destroys somebody else's process, and they haven't really thought about it. Now, I know it says no silo thinking, but I think just to expand that a little bit and make people realise that they're expected to understand the implication of any innovation that they have across the organisation, not just in their own department.
Couldn't agree more with that. And I think as an organisation, we want to look at not having those silos. So it's understanding that a decision that you may make as a service could have quite rippling consequences for other departments. And I think that's why, as Susan's quite rightly said, it's about the core accountabilities of this group, about when it comes to their shared accountabilities for the organisation. We can factor that into the change leader as well, about making sure you're thinking about your decisions in the bigger context. I keep saying to my team, you're not just we're a team, but we're part of a bigger service, as in corporate services, and part of the council. So whatever we do will have an effect on everyone. So we can't think about it just being about us. And I think that's a lot of the culture stuff that we're trying to really embed now, and make sure that we don't have decisions that are being made by one service that could have significant consequences for another. So it's a really valid point.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think it's also about the cumulative impact as well as the impacts on other departments. It's the, as I say, cumulative maybe. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the other thing, just to say quickly, is this will help the public as well and councillors. It's much easier for a councillor to explain that this person is responsible for a service than there's some sort of assistant director that nobody's clear what their responsibilities are. So I think this is good. Thank you.
Super, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm now just kind of digesting what Pauline just said about the ability to recognise the role with the title service director rather than assistant director. My question was just going to be around how you kind of got to that conclusion. Was it based on feedback? Because I'm sort of interested in the type of person that you're trying to attract. Is it somebody who's got previous council experience? Are you trying to maybe attract people coming in new, say from the private sector, who may not know the distinction? Because again, ultimately it's still an assistant director role, and certainly somebody from outside, within the public sector will come in and go, well, actually that's but it's kind of what proposition are you almost trying to sell with? That selling is the wrong word, but do you understand what I mean by that?
It is a lot of feedback that we work with. As Susan said at the beginning, the current assistant directors have been heavily involved in a piece of this work. So when we've looked at the corporate accountabilities, as I'm going to keep shared accountabilities, that's what we're going to call them, they've been really involved in this, and it's about having them on the journey and not doing something to them. So it's looking at benchmarking when you're looking at something, what does it mean in terms of a job title? Job titles can mean certain things. Some people genuinely aren't bothered, but then some people are, because it's about that raising that awareness, that profile of that role. So for me, I think a service, it does explain you're a service director for corporate services, or you're a service director for planning. It sort of does what it says on the tin. It is that you're leading that service, and that's your service. And then you've got your bigger directors that cover all of it. And I think it is based on that feedback. I think typically at that level, you do need, in my view, significant experience of local government at that level, because of the complexities it brings. You will get interest from private sector candidates at that level. But when you think about the specialisms and how niche we are in what we do, it can be, I think, at that level hard to transition from private to public sector working in a smooth way that will make sure we're delivering what we absolutely need to deliver for services.
Yeah, and so I'll just go back and comment on that as I'm kind of thinking it through as you're talking as well. I can see that actually if they're saying, do you know what, we would like to be, that this will make our lives easier as well, being recognised with this title, then yeah, that makes complete sense. Thank you for sort of thinking it through moment. Because thank you.
Because certainly, if I can just add to that, it's my take as it's the feedback from the assistant directors. At the same time, it is what we can see from the sector. We look at sort of adverts from right across the country. You see them, and you know what's attracting and what isn't, and in the language that's being used, and the type of posts and the way that they're written is attractive. And we know that we're going to be looking to advertise some two roles in the future which will be coming here, and I think the way that we can define them now makes them far more attractive, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we're confident knowing we've got a couple of interims covering roles at the moment, which obviously command a higher rate. You'll see that through our agency figures. So we are about to embark on a recruitment campaign for some really important roles, children's services and also in place and growth. And we know that if we go out currently, it's almost a little bit, you won't get that immediate attraction, but by going out with service director, we know that we'll get it based on the feedback that we've had. And as I say, it always evolves in local government. They tend to change job titles at level quite often, and everyone then tends, it's a bit like a domino effect, everyone follows suit with it. So
Super, thank you. Yusra and then Prue.
Okay. Is there any responsibility difference as well in terms of AD and service director because of the increment in the salary as well? So, or would it be same or?
No, it's not the same. It's very much, I don't know if you want to go into the detail on this, but it's very much around the corporate shared responsibilities that we are actually setting out, you know, what those actually are. Certainly our expectation is that we expect a lot more, and that's why we've involved as well the assistant directors in this process. And in terms of the framework, so there are two points here. There's the oh,
okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
there's
I've seen this.
that particular document which sets out the what we're going to call accountabilities, and yeah. No, it's all right. But it's and then there's the performance framework. So there's something about actually being clear about what the shared accountabilities are, and then it's being measured against the performance framework. So it's not going to be an automatic move to sort of like the next grade, if you like, when a person's in a particular role. So yeah, there's the.
Because I like the concept of service director instead of ADI because it's more rewarding in terms of, and that's good to know that if responsibilities have been increased as well. So yeah. So thank you.
they don't exist. But what we've done is sorry, Captain, it gone off. Sorry, they don't exist in the current form at the moment. So what we've done is done workshops with the ADs as they are, and they have been integral to designing these. And then we're looking at how do we make sure then that they are equipped to deliver them. So we're looking at different packages of training to make sure that any areas that we've got that may need refreshing, that it's being done. And that's where that then performance framework will come in. We'll make sure they're committed in our leadership training, and then we'll manage them through that performance framework linked to those shared corporate accountabilities.
Thanks.
Super, thank you very much, and Prue.
I'll do a very small thing first and then move out into the bigger picture over the next couple of comments. On page, I don't know what page it is, page 108 of the agenda, you've got a page of digital acumen, and I'm not sure you've captured everything in there because you've got lots of words which roughly mean this, but it doesn't quite say it explicitly, is you need to understand what else data can do. Yep, not just what you can get from your existing stuff, but what else can you do with it? And I think that is quite important for somebody at that level to be able to see beyond what you're currently doing. So that's the only thing I could see in any of those that I want to be. I am very unhappy at the idea of using market supplements as a routine thing. So I think it's really important to move away from that. We only use them when we absolutely have to. And so the fact that we've got 7 people on them already tells you that we've got something wrong in our system at the moment. So we have to do this, and looking at the table, we are clearly out of kilter, and we have to address that. I'm very pleased that one of the bits that's coming with this is this what we call it, shared responsibility. Yes, whatever it is, yeah. Because I think that is what is key to making us work as a council, is that corporate approach, which is saving us from the silly decision making that can sometimes take place when you're under pressure and you don't see the bigger picture, and you cut off your nose to spite your face, and you end up with a short-term decision which is not in your long-term interest corporately. So I think that's a really important step forward to bring that corporate accountability one step down. It's working really well at CLT level, and it started to work at what we're now calling service director level, which I think is a jolly good title, and I'm happy with that. To bring that down, and the more we can bring it down the pyramid, the better. And I think it's making a huge difference to our effectiveness as a council and what we can do with the resources we've got. So I think this is a very good paper, and I hope that we can improve it so that we can get out on and do that court children's services recruitment that we actually need to do, which we can't do until after this is in place. But I think it will make a huge difference to us, and make everybody think in the right way, the way we want people to think, which they're beginning to, but the more we can do to encourage it, the better.
Just in response to your point about digital, couldn't agree more. So what we're looking at is when we design the workshops for each of these, we'll use our subject matter experts we've got within the organisation. So for political acumen, we'll look at using Andrew's expertise, because it's fine to have a broad sense of the political understanding, but what's unique to Wokingham, because every constitution is different. So with the digital one, we have just recently, and if they've not started, they're due to start, recruited a service manager for digital that will sit under in digital data and technology, and they will be involved in designing that. So there is more in there, but we need those experts to really help us deliver that piece of work.
On the point about data, and I wonder if it should be digital and data acumen, because we've talked a lot about knowing our people, knowing our place, and actually it's, unless it's covered somewhere else, that
Big problem there, you won't fit it in the little box.
Digital data, because I would see
okay.
Have to drop the acumen then.
Yeah.
I think as well, just to reassure you about that whole cascading, whatever happens at this layer, if we can get the service director through, it would then replicate into like my layer as head of service. So you've got corporate leadership team, then we have our tier 3 of service directors, and then we have our head of service. So the next layer is actually called head of service. So it fits then, it's sort of a synergy between service director and head of service, because a service director could have a couple of heads of service, because I'd be head of HR, and then it just makes it, and whatever happens will replicate.
So if I could build up one more comment, this is why I think the move away from assistant director to service director is sensible, because you can have lots of assistant directors, and who are, it doesn't make any sense. You think like you'd have a director and an assistant for that person. Nobody's ever sure, are they supposed to stand in for the director when they're not there, or what are they supposed to? And actually, which is why I think service director is a much better idea, because you know that they're responsible for that bit. Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Pauline.
At the risk of getting involved in wordsmithing, your digital and your data thing is actually under financial acumen. So if you look at the fifth one down, leaders with excellent financial acumen will have knowledge of data and intelligence to inform the need. So that's actually possibly in the wrong place. And I wonder if ROI evaluation is also in the wrong place, because you want ROI evaluation not just in digital, but in everything. So I would put the ROI evaluation in finance, and I'd move the digital one into the other one into the other box, I think.
Are there any more comments or questions on this one? Fantastic. I just had a couple of questions, really looking at point 3 and point 4 on the recommendation. I can see that there would be a consultation process, assuming that that consultation process is successful and this is implemented, how would that you then move the current assistant directors into this new structure?
So you'll see from the costings that in year one, there's a minimal cost, circa about £10,000 to do it. So what we're doing is we're using existing SCP points to create that new band. So the majority will transfer, and if they've got the market supplement, we've added that in, and they would map over to their existing salary, and there would be a couple of points headroom then for the performance framework to be implemented. So it's not about significant increases. There'll be a couple that would get an increase lower down, but nothing significant. We're using existing pay that we've got already at the moment.
Pauline?
That triggers another question. Are market supplements pensionable at the moment?
They are currently
Okay, fine.
pensionable.
So there's no cost there?
There's no cost because we're already paying that. I think, as somebody quite rightly said before, the use of market supplements longer term aren't ideal for the organisation, but they're not ideal for an individual because you shouldn't be relying on that supplement because they can be taken away at any point. So they
would actually be really difficult to take them away if they're pensionable anyway.
Yeah,
because it has all sorts of complexities in the pension calculation.
Yeah,
Sounds
they
like a
are
nightmare.
fully pensionable.
Yeah, no, not somewhere you ever want to go.
We need to remove them.
Yeah.
Super. Absolutely. I was going to say, any further comments or questions before we move on to the recommendations? We've got 4 recommendations on page 89. Is everybody happy that we take all of those recommendations together? So I propose that we adopt the recommendations on page 89. Seconded by Pauline. I think everybody in favour. Thank you very much. I think that is the close of our business tonight. So yes, thank you.